This is Lisa Henderson, Editor-in-Chief with Applied Clinical Trials, and we're here today with Dr. Gerd Arold, Senior Director, Scientific Affairs, Patient Pharmacology Services at PRA. Thank you, Gerd, for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me here.
So we wanted to discuss more around the early development services, and I was wondering if you could tell us what the market requirement is for early phase patient studies.
Lisa, there's a clear trend in the pharmaceutical and also biotechnology industry to reduce the time to bring a new investigational medical product into the market. One approach is to streamline the clinical research time, and as clinical study delay is one of the best-known reasons for product launch delay, many companies are working on strategies and management tools to reduce trial delays. Another approach is to streamline the early phases of clinical trials in order to allow earlier start of later phase trials. This can be performed by implementing so-called umbrella protocols, meaning a combination of several earlier standalone studies, like single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose, food effect, or gender effect studies, into one single protocol. Or another trend is also to perform the first-in-man study as a combination of single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose, and proof of concept in one protocol in patients. These first-in-patient protocols were formerly mainly seen for oncological products, where the toxicity of the IMP did not allow performing early phase studies in healthy volunteers. We see these studies now more and more in other non-toxic indications, like inflammatory or metabolic diseases.
What are the benefits and challenges for patient studies?
Obtaining most possible information about a new drug in less time and reaching faster go, no-go decisions is the driving force behind the idea to perform more first-in-man studies directly in patients of the targeted population. Phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers are limited to evaluate the safety and the pharmacokinetic of a new drug. But if a trial is designed to include patients early, you can learn even about the pharmacodynamics of a new drug and the mode of action, and there are better chances to study the preclinically evaluated characteristics and targets of a new compound. The challenges of early patient studies are, of course, first of all, the access to patients. Using databases like you do this for healthy volunteer studies are only useful in stable patient populations, like, for example, diabetic patients. Patients with more severe diseases, like severe renally impaired patients, cannot be recruited from a database as the activity of a disease progresses and also life expectancy for these patients is very low. So a 6-month-old data in a database would already be outdated and not deliver reliable information. Also, recruitment strategies which are working well for healthy volunteers like advertisements in newspapers or other medias do not reach these patient groups as inclusion criteria for these studies are much more complex. Our experience is that an active network of specialists working in close cooperation with a CRO is the best source for the recruitment of patients for these early phase patient trials. Of course, there are other confounding factors like concomitant medications, co-diseases, which have to be carefully considered when planning first-in-man studies in patients. As co-medication, for example, may interfere with the PK results by drug-drug interactions. That is why we always recommend to include scientific teams very early in the development of a patient study. Also, choosing the right study team and study sites can be very challenging. Large university or commercial phase 1 units have access to patients and have staff to handle activities required for phase 1 trials, like accurate pharmacokinetic blood sampling, and an advantage of university sites is that they have key opinion leaders. On the other hand, disadvantages of university sites is that they have key opinion leaders. So there are many studies running at the same time. The startup time can take very long, and costs are often high. Smaller hospitals, however, work without key opinion leaders, and they have also access to patient populations. And less trials are running there at the same time. By providing accurate training to these smaller hospitals by a dedicated study team, you can ensure high quality of the data and the patient safety in a GCP environment with fast recruitment rates. So the main benefit of early patient studies is receiving robust proof of concept data in much shorter time than using the traditional healthy volunteer way, which finally will allow us faster go, no-go decisions.
And can you describe the conventional versus non-conventional recruitment models for these early phase patient population studies?
Well, there are only two ways how to perform early clinical patient studies. Either the traditional way in performing phase 1 studies by using phase 1 healthy volunteer units and try to find the patients and bring them into the healthy volunteer unit for the duration of a clinical study. This model works if you are looking for patients with diseases which can be recruited via the same pathways as your healthy volunteer trials, like type 2 diabetes or obese patients. The shortfall with this model is that more severe patient populations cannot be reached by healthy volunteers recruitment strategies, and that treating specialists with knowledge and also the equipment needed to treat these severe patients are usually not available at a phase 1 healthy volunteer unit. The other way performing early patient studies is using a typical phase 2-3 approach, where the hospital-based investigators will receive a preliminary training on the study requirements by the PRA, and then the PRA is mainly monitoring the study. And in this model, the safety of the patient is always controlled. However, a highly controlled and standardized GCP environment is required for these early phase studies, where timely PK measurements are one of the most important requirements, is often not feasible. As a consequence of this, we have developed a third way to perform early patient trials, a model which combines the advantages of both the models described before, and we call this model the unit-on-demand model. This is a unique way to get fast access to patients for early patient studies. The idea behind the model is, if we cannot bring the patients into a phase 1 clinical unit, then we bring the unit to the patient. And this means that we rent some rooms in the hospital, install a clinical unit in a GCP environment there in the hospital, including all standardized and controlled equipment needed for the study, and provide all training to the hospital investigator. In addition, we bring in experienced study physicians and study nurses. And every time a patient is at the site, our staff is taking care, starting from blood sampling in time, over sample preparation, logistics for shipments, and documentation of the data. An entire study team comprised of scientists, physicians, study managers, and data managers is supporting the investigator to deliver high-quality data combined with highest safety conditions for the patients.
And where are your hospitals located?
So currently we are working in Central and Eastern Europe. We are located in 5 sites there. That's the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and Romania.
And what are the advantages and challenges for conducting these early clinical trials in Central and Eastern Europe compared to the U.S. or Western Europe?
Mm-hmm. So challenges in Central and Eastern Europe are, first of all, the long approval period by the regulatory authorities and the ethics committee. As you know, all of these European countries have adopted the European directive. So all of them have a 60-day review period after the submission of a standardized CTA package. As you know, approvals, for example, in the Netherlands for healthy volunteer studies can be obtained in 14 days. So this is often seen by sponsors as a very long time. Also, we know that there are also cultural and language differences in Central and Eastern Europe, and also the administrative and logistical support or availability of trained study nurses in hospitals is rarely seen. But on the other hand, we still see large patient populations there in a centralized hospital system with large patient pool per hospital and higher motivated investigators in Central Eastern Europe compared with Western Europe or with the United States. And referring patients from one to another site is part of the overall healthcare system. So the motivation for investigators to participate in early clinical trials is not only for receiving additional funding, but also the interest in new therapies. Based on our experience over the last 20 years, the 60-day review period by the regulatory authorities is made up quickly by much higher recruitment rates. So the main advantage is seen by an established network of referring physicians who are willing to refer their patients to an investigational site. So if I would come back to the example of a PK study in renally impaired patients I've given before, we usually see that the investigational site at the hospital has access to one patient group. For example, if someone is treating severe renally impaired patients, he doesn't have access to the mild impaired patients because these are usually treated by a GP. And for this, we have to establish a network of referring physicians which also can send then the mild and the moderate patients. So as a summary, we see a much faster enrollment rate and higher quality of data for early patient studies in Central and Eastern Europe by using the unit-on-demand model, where our operational study teams support the investigators with the entire setup of the clinical study, including building up a GCP environment in the hospital, providing validated equipment, clinical trial materials and training, and taking care for the documentation, the logistics, the trial management and recruitment, so that the investigator can really focus on what he is strong in, on the patient care and on the patient safety. We have implemented this model for many indications, like for example, renal and hepatically impaired patients, hepatitis C, rheumatoid arthritis, and for cancer patients. And we see enhanced recruitment rates and faster results with high quality data compared to the other models.
All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you a lot, Lisa.